Evelyn Brooks had spent the last decade living a life that felt like an elaborate disguise, one she had never asked for but had resigned herself to wearing, a janitor's uniform that fit her body but not her soul, a mop and broom in her hands instead of a throttle and control stick, the fluorescent glow of hangar lights above her instead of the endless sweep of the sky, and each day she rose before dawn, tied her hair beneath a simple cap, pulled on gloves that smelled faintly of disinfectant, and walked into Falcon Aerospace like a ghost among the living, pushing her cart past engineers who hardly noticed her, past pilots who strutted with cocky grins, past executives who didn't even glance at the woman wiping their mess, and if they did, they never saw her. They saw only the cleaning lady, never the decorated fighter pilot who had once owned the skies, never the strategist who had outflown missiles and commanded squadrons, never the woman who had risked her life countless times for a country that later turned its back on her. She had been Major Evelyn Brooks once, call sign Hawk, a legend whispered among pilots, the one who could thread a jet through terrain so tight others called it suicide, the one who saved her wingmen by pulling maneuvers instructors claimed impossible, the one who, despite her undeniable skill, had been quietly buried by politics, by a system that could not handle a black woman standing taller, flying faster, and commanding louder than the men who thought the sky belonged to them. 10 years ago, a fabricated scandal and the silent nods of higher-ups who didn't want her kind in the cockpit had stripped her wings, dishonorably discharging her under pretense, crushing not only her career but a part of her spirit, and she had walked away from the fight not because she couldn't win in the air but because she realized no amount of medals could change the prejudice of those grounded on earth. So she vanished from the headlines, sold her house, packed her uniforms in a box she never opened again, and took the first job she could find at Falcon Aerospace, not because she needed the money, though the pay was pitiful compared to the life she'd known, but because she could not completely sever herself from the sound of engines, from the smell of fuel, from the sleek silhouettes of jets waiting to be flown. It was a kind of self-imposed exile, close enough to remember, far enough to be invisible. And for 10 years, she scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins, swept hangars, all while carrying a secret that would have made every man in that building choke on his arrogance, and though part of her longed to shout it, to remind them who she was, another part relished the anonymity, the freedom of being underestimated, because when you are invisible, you see everything, you hear everything, and Evelyn made sure she never stopped learning. She watched the new recruits with their nervous swagger, noted their mistakes, mentally corrected their flight patterns when she caught glimpses of training footage, and sometimes, late at night, when the hangar was empty, she would sit inside the darkened cockpit of a decommissioned fighter, her hands ghosting over the controls, whispering the checklist under her breath, eyes closed as if she could trick her body into believing she was back where she belonged. Then came that blistering July afternoon, heavy with heat and tension, when Falcon Aerospace prepared for one of the most important demonstrations in its history, the unveiling of the Skyraptor X-29, a billion-dollar prototype designed to secure contracts from the highest levels of the Defense Department and foreign allies alike. The hangar buzzed like a hornet's nest, engineers scrambling, executives barking orders, generals arriving in sharp uniforms with medals that gleamed but meant little to Evelyn, who knew what real combat earned you, and in the midst of it all, she quietly pushed her mop bucket across the glossy floor, ignored by everyone, though she knew more about what was about to happen than most of the men in suits. She had overheard the late-night arguments, the hushed fears about stability issues, the whispers that the plane was being rushed for political gain, and when she saw Colonel Davis, the cocky test pilot chosen for the demo, strutting around with his helmet tucked under his arm, boasting to anyone within earshot that he would show the brass a performance they'd never forget, Evelyn bit back the urge to tell him that arrogance in the cockpit could kill faster than enemy fire. She had noticed, too, as she mopped near the fueling station, that one of the auxiliary intake valves hadn't been properly calibrated, a minor oversight, one the mechanics should have caught, but they were too rushed, too eager, and she knew in her bones that if Davis pushed the jet too hard without fixing it, the aircraft would stall in mid-sequence. She wanted to speak, to warn, but who would listen to the janitor? If she said something, they'd laugh, maybe even fire her, and so she kept silent, her chest tight as she wheeled her cart toward the corner, telling herself it wasn't her fight anymore, that she had chosen this life, that silence was safer. The engines roared, the hangar doors yawned open, and the sleek jet rolled onto the runway like a predator unveiled, the crowd of dignitaries and officers applauding politely until Davis taxied into position, his voice crackling over the comms with forced confidence. Evelyn stood in the shadow of the hangar door, her mop handle pressed against her palm like a spear, and she knew within seconds of takeoff that her fears were justified. The jet faltered in its climb, shuddering violently as Davis tried to compensate, alarms blaring in the control tower, engineers shouting over one another, generals demanding answers, and then, in a blaze of panic, Davis aborted, ejecting before the jet had even stabilized, his parachute blooming uselessly against the blue sky while the billion-dollar prototype veered dangerously close to disaster. By some miracle of design, it coasted to a trembling stop on the runway, but the demonstration was in shambles, and the reputation of Falcon Aerospace dangled by a thread. Chaos erupted, voices raised, tempers flared, and in the middle of it, someone shouted in bitter sarcasm, "Hell, at this point even the janitor could do a better job than you clowns." The words, meant as insult, hung in the air like a challenge, and before Evelyn could slip away, a red-faced general turned, desperate and furious, and jabbed a finger at her. "You! Get in there! Reset it! Stabilize it!" She blinked, stunned, trying to protest, but another voice snapped, "Move! We don't have time for your hesitation." Hands shoved her forward, rough, dismissive, as if pushing her toward humiliation, certain she would fail and provide a scapegoat. Evelyn's heart pounded, not from fear but from the flood of memories surging back, and as she climbed the ladder into the cockpit, every motion felt both foreign and intimately familiar. The canopy closed with a heavy thunk, sealing her inside, and the noise outside faded into a dull murmur. Alone with the machine, Evelyn inhaled, steadying her hands on the controls, and something inside her, something she had buried for 10 long years, snapped awake. Her fingers moved without hesitation, flipping switches, resetting the systems, whispering the checklist under her breath, her voice calm, controlled, every motion a muscle memory carved into her bones. The jet responded like a loyal steed recognizing its true rider, the hum smoothing, the screen stabilizing, and when the tower's frantic voice crackled in her ear, urging her to just idle it down, just keep it on the ground, Evelyn ignored them. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, fixed on the horizon, and for the first time in a decade, her hands pushed the throttle forward. The jet roared alive, shooting down the runway like a bullet, the ground blurring beneath her, and as it lifted into the sky, the weight of 10 years of silence, humiliation, and invisibility peeled away from her shoulders. She climbed higher, faster, than Davis had dared, pulling into a vertical ascent that made the generals on the ground gasp, then rolled smoothly into a barrel maneuver that defied the very limitations Falcon's engineers had claimed impossible. The crowd below stared upward, mouths agape, as the janitor danced with the clouds, pulling maneuvers no simulator could replicate, each roll, each dive, each precision climb a testament to the years she had been silenced but never broken. Her call sign, Hawk, screamed inside her mind like a resurrection. For 15 glorious minutes, she was not invisible, not forgotten, not a janitor, she was Evelyn Brooks, fighter pilot, legend, predator of the skies, and when she brought the jet down with a flawless landing that sent dust swirling dramatically around the runway, the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The canopy hissed open, she climbed down with unhurried grace, and there, leaning against the hangar wall, was her mop, waiting patiently like a reminder of the disguise she had worn for too long. She walked past the stunned engineers, past the wide-eyed generals, past Davis who looked pale and humiliated, and she did not speak, did not explain, because the truth was already burning in their minds. The woman they had dismissed for a decade had just shown them what true mastery looked like, and Evelyn Brooks was done hiding.